Hello, everybody. It's Christina Haswood, and I want to welcome everybody here today for tuning in to Advanced Native American Political Leadership, our Facebook Live. So we do a monthly or so Facebook Live and highlighting some amazing Indigenous leaders. Advance is a project created to address the need for increased Native American representation in elected and appointed offices through the country. We know we need equitable representation in elected offices, and increasing Native representation in office is crucial to securing a reflective democracy for all Americans, one in which the country benefits from the leadership and talents of Native peoples and is responsive to the assets and issues of Native citizens. Historically, legal, and contemporary factors affect the level and depth of engagement of Native Americans, especially Native women, in the political system, contributing to drastic underrepresentation of Indigenous peoples as elected leaders at every level of government. According to the 2020 U.S. Census data and our own research at Advance, Native American, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian peoples make up just 0.03% of elected officials, whereas we represent about 3.4% of the total U.S. population. In order to reach representational parity in elected office alone, we need to elect more than 17,000 Indigenous leaders at all levels of government out of 520,000 elected officials nationwide. Investment in increasing Native American representation in elected offices is a crucial endeavor for securing a reflective democracy for all Americans, one in which the country benefits from the leadership and talents of Native peoples and is responsive to the assets and issues of Native citizens. So I want to first introduce our guest today, Ginger Sykes Torres, who made national and just so much buzz when she ran for Congress. Ginger Sykes Torres is Dine Navajo, is a former candidate for U.S. Congress in Arizona, an environmental and climate leader and passionate advocate for the issues affecting Native Americans in Arizona. Ginger has assisted state and national political organizations, nonprofits, and candidates with engaging Native voters and advocates for resources to do this at a local level. In 2020, Ginger formed a grassroots initiative called Dine for Biden to help boost Native American enthusiasm for the Biden-Harris and Mark Kelly coordinated campaigns in Arizona. She currently lives in Phoenix with her husband and 3 kids. So I would like to welcome Ginger to our Zoom here today, our live, and dive into the first question. So Ginger, what was the moment you knew that you needed to run for office?
Thank you so much for having me, Christina and Ponky. I am just so happy to be here and share some of my lessons learned and my story with everyone that's on the call today. So my evolution to running for office is interesting. I didn't think it was something that I would ever, it was never on my bucket list of things to do, but the seed was planted in my head by an elected leader here in the Phoenix area. About 2 years ago, I was approached and asked if there was any possibility that I would think of running for office here. At first, I just kind of dismissed it, but then I was like, well, maybe I should think about this more seriously because it was somebody I respected a lot. And I thought it through. And when an opportunity came up in my state legislative district, I put my name in to be considered. And it was the first thing I'd ever done with regard to running for any type of office. And I made it in the top 3, and the decision was made by a board of supervisors that was from the opposite party. And so I counted that as a success for me because I was able to have my message be heard positively. And I had a lot of positive feedback in that really short period. It was like a 4-day period span of time where I was like putting my name out there. And so that really got me thinking of like what offices I realistically would want to try to run for in the future. I also volunteered on campaigns in the meantime here in the Phoenix area. So I got to know our elected leaders through that volunteerism, and I got to realize that our elected leaders are regular people. They are not superheroes. They they're just as capable as most of us are. And so through that, I gained kind of the willpower and the self-confidence to realize that it's something that I could do too.
Great. Thank you so much. That's such a powerful story, and stepping up, during COVID times, right? And seeing a need in the community. And that's just a great story. And we'll get into our next question, but also want to introduce my co-host, Representative Dr. Ponka-We Victors-Cozad. Feel free to introduce yourself, Ponka-We.
Oh, good evening, everybody. I'm Representative Dr. Ponka-We Victors-Cozad, and I'm a member of the Tohono O'odham Nation and Ponca tribe. I am completing my 6th term in the Kansas House of Representatives, and I'm honored to be moderating this with my colleague, Representative Hazwood. And Ginger, that's so interesting that you talked about planting the seed, because I use the same thing. Like, somebody planted the seed in my head to run for office 12 years ago, and here I am today. It just takes that, planting the seed, working on campaigns, seeing what, how it is behind the scenes kind of thing. And so my question for you, and thank you again for being with us this evening, is my question is, what did your community involvement look like before you announced you were running for Congress, and how do you think that shaped your platform?
Thank you for the question. And also hearing that I am coming to you from Phoenix, Arizona, which is the homeland of the O'odham and the Peepash peoples. And so I wanted to recognize that here today. My community involvement. So I was fortunate to take some time off of my career. My background is environmental science and policy, but when my husband and I decided to start a family, I spent several years as a full-time working mother and decided when I wanted to grow my family a little bit more, I wanted to stay home with my babies. And so while they were younger and while they were growing up, I got really involved in the community. So I became involved on a wide range of boards and commissions in my city. So I serve on the board of trustees of the Heard Museum, the board of the Ronald McDonald House of Arizona, the board of a leadership development organization here in Arizona called Valley Leadership. And I just got involved. I also mentioned that I had gotten involved with working on campaigns and volunteering for campaigns. And so through all of these kind of civic leadership activities, I expanded my network tremendously within the Valley. In addition, with COVID, we all knew how challenging that was for tribal communities. And so I started making masks out of my house with my mother, and we sent thousands and thousands of masks to the city and to first responders throughout the Navajo Nation area, the Western Navajo Nation area. And I was approached by friends that also wanted to help out with that endeavor. And so we all got together and kind of created this little relief network within the Phoenix area to send and ship supplies up to first responders on the Navajo Nation. So that whole endeavor grew exponentially more than I would have been able to do on my own. But through that, that was its own exercise on expanding my network and my value in the community. In addition, during the last campaign cycle, I also worked a lot to get out the vote, especially the Native vote. I was very worried that with COVID, Native communities would be afraid to go to the polls, be afraid to cast their votes. And so I worked extra hard to make sure through social media channels, through creating my own grassroots campaign, to make sure that Native communities could be excited about the election and knew how much their voices mattered to that election in particular, but always. And so I was thrilled, when Arizona had a historic Native turnout in the last election. So I was so proud to be a part of that, working with our state parties and other Native leaders here in Arizona to make that vote turnout happen. In addition, I stayed involved very professionally with getting involved in our city's environmental commission. So I serve as vice chair of a City of Phoenix Environmental Commission. The City of Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the nation. And so we are providing advice and recommendations to the Phoenix City Council on how to deal with the city's environmental issues and make sure the city is thinking through sustainability and working to become the most sustainable city in the West. And so I also lead a subcommittee under that commission called the Urban Heat Island Tree and Shade Subcommittee. Heat is a direct, extreme heat is familiar in Arizona to a lot of Arizonans. However, climate change is causing heat to be longer and more severe than it has been in the past. And the communities that suffered the most in my own town are the most vulnerable communities, those being minority communities, lower income areas. And so a lot of those overlap with where our Native people live in the city of Phoenix. And so I took it upon myself to make it a priority to try to address this issue from more of a policy level and providing these recommendations to City Council that many of them have been implemented. The city has adopted the first publicly funded heat office in the entire United States. And so very proud of my work in terms of advocacy for these types of policies. So through all of that, I stayed involved professionally, socially, within our community. I think all of that did help shape me wanting to run for office.
That's amazing. Because I'm in that same boat right now. I just had I had a daughter last year, she's 1. And so I want to be a mom at home. And so that's one of the reasons I retired from the legislature. This is my last few months. But because I want to be a stay-at-home mom, but yet it's motivating your story because I still want to be involved in some way, shape, or form, and like helping others as far as on campaigns and things like that. So yes, even though you're a mom, you can still get involved and you can still help everyone. And like you said, with the masks, that's amazing that, it's the little things like that add up, that can contribute to your platform and give you motivation to run for office. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and I guess part of it was like, I basically, as my kids have gotten older and gotten more self-sufficient, they're all thankfully in school now, which has made things easier for me to stay involved. But as they've gotten older, I've taken more and more of these commitments on. But that also showed me like I am spinning my wheels trying to solve these problems that are actually like policy problems. And so that's kind of what drove me to want to run for office, is that I'm working so hard, volunteering and giving my time and helping organizations on the ground that are helping people. But what really needs to happen is some of these issues need to be solved on the policy level.
I definitely agree, and I think that's also a good recommendation for folks who are hesitant to run for office, is to be involved at a board, to be involved at city committees and county committees. There's always needs to be an Indigenous voice at the table. For me, I sit at our local homeless shelter board. As we know, that Indigenous folks have a high rate of homelessness and chronic homelessness, and to make sure that we're doing these services in a culturally mannered way for folks. So really appreciate that work that you've done. And I know how hot it gets. So I went to Arizona State and tried to wear flip-flops one day in 3-digit weather and my feet were burning.
You see people waiting at the bus stops and you're just like, oh my goodness, what can we do to get more shade here? Like, help you out a little bit. So it really does make a difference.
And with your past community work, how did that shape your platform when running for office?
So my platform really was shaped out of my the community, the office that I was running for, and also my professional background. Obviously, being having worked in the field of environmental policy, environmental science for many years as a consultant, as a planner, advocating for renewable energy, responsible development. That was a big part of my platform for running. I also did want to recognize that our state has never had a member of Congress that is of Indigenous descent. And so that in and of itself, I think was important to point out, especially in my district. The district that I live in has 2 tribal communities in it. However, I don't think any Native person has actually ever run in my district. I don't have the data on that, but I've never heard of anyone Native running in this district. It's one of the more affluent districts in Arizona. It's and very educated. And so it was a little, I think I caught people off guard running as a Native in this district, but also a lot of people recognized and were able to realize that, hey, like, she's right, we've never had a Native, and we have 22 tribal federally recognized tribes in our state. Like, why don't we have that representation? And so I think it was still worthwhile to run, to get that message out and make it be heard. And so now there's a lot more awareness built in the community.
Thank you so much. I know we've met with a lot of folks in Arizona, and your name almost comes up every meeting. So folks have felt that energy, and it's just so inspirational to see that. I think we see that in Kansas too, with Sharice. When she ran for Congress, it really just opens folks' eyes, like, oh my goodness, we can really do these and run in these positions. So going on to the next question, what bills, legislation, or proclamation that you've been a part of are some type of in that realm of work?
So a lot of, I mentioned some of the work that I did with the Environmental Commission, how we got the heat office, advocated for that. We've been advocating for the city to implement something called cool corridors, which is stretches of streets that are lined with trees or shade, so that those pedestrians out there during the hot summer months have some respite from the heat. I also worked with our Mayor of Phoenix to change the name of a street, a derogatory name of a street in my area, within 1.5 miles of my house, within half a mile of my kids' school. It was a street leading up to the Piestewa Peak area, and it had the name of the old peak name, which is the derogatory word for a woman that we all know. And so the street leading up to that peak still had the old name. And so I worked with the mayor's office, worked with some grassroots organizers, local community organizers to get that street name changed. And there was a very nice ceremony. A proclamation was issued by the mayor, and was also invited to the actual like street name sign coming down, the old one and the new one being put up. And so consider that a victory for our local communities here. And in addition, I'm also on the board of the Indigenous Peoples Initiative, and we've been working through that to make sure that Indigenous Peoples Day is recognized. And so happy to say that Columbia University recognized that in New York City this past Indigenous Peoples Day a few days ago. And so proud of the work that we're doing in that area.
And we've met with Dylan, who's
isn't he amazing? He's such an amazing young leader coming up. I'm so happy to support him.
Shout out Dylan, and just really doing it out there in the East Coast. So can you go more into depth of the renaming of the street, right? We see the efforts coming from Auntie Deb, Secretary Holland, renaming a lot of our national landmarks that might have racial, indigenous slur names. And I think the work that you did is work that folks can do in their home community, at the city level, if there's a street name or a landmark that has a derogatory term for indigenous folks, and get that name changed. How long was that process, and like, how did you even, like, where do you even start with that?
You know, I cannot remember how it actually started, but I do remember as soon as we were aware that it was going to be coming up on a city council agenda, we, meaning me and a few friends of mine, got together and put together a Facebook group, invited you know, a lot of local Native activist types or people that would, you know, are very involved in these types of things to share information about the process. And I think that's what's critical, is just knowing the process and knowing that like the dates of the city council meetings, knowing that you have to register if you want to speak at those meetings, like a day ahead of time, like the cutoff time to those, knowing how much time you have to speak at a public meeting and being able to practice what you want to say beforehand so that when you are speaking, the elected leaders are able to hear what you're saying and saying it very, very clearly. And so I think those steps are very, they seem like they're intuitive, but at the same time, they really make you stand out. And having served on commissions, I also serve on a bond committee right now, where I was appointed by our mayor's office to evaluate projects that are going into a bond election next year. And I've been sitting up there and hearing public feedback, and it means so much to hear people call in and tell you what they think. Like, your elected leaders listen. And so the more people that you can get and coordinate to call in to support any type of measure, the better chance you'll have at getting it passed. And so I think that's valuable. Also, working with community leaders or organizations to send letters of support are also very valuable, because those are visible public indicators of support that can help convince your city council members to vote one way or another. And so I think those were very easy steps to follow, but it just takes a little bit of administrative tracking, making sure that you know when those meetings are, making sure people show up, making sure you call in. I think my daughter even called in for one of them. But it doesn't matter if you call in every time or only one time, like your voice is still heard, and it's still recorded in the official city minutes. So that's what I would recommend, is just making sure you know all of the deadlines, know the process. If you don't know the process, reach out to somebody, one of the staff in your city council member's office, and they can help you figure that out.
Thank you. Yes, that is so true. Especially, you mentioned a process, and that brought back bills, getting from A to Z, and it's a process, and you have to learn the process and the ins and outs. And like I told my mentee here, Representative Hazwood, there's not just one way. If something don't work out, try a different way. Try a different avenue. Yeah, there's always more than one way to everything. So one way don't work, don't be discouraged, try a different way. So my next question for you is, there are many obstacles you are faced when deciding to run for office. And so what were your obstacles, and what made you say yes to running for office?
So I would say I had a lot of obstacles. One of, I guess, the biggest obstacle is just not knowing how to run for office, like just coming in as a newbie and having to figure it all out while I'm running for office. And so it's not that it can't be done. It's just that there is a whole industry built around running for office, built around campaigns. And so it helps to know, again, back to process, kind of know what you might be going through in advance. I can see how that would help. So I'm not saying it's not impossible, because I did it, but at the same time, it would have been a lot easier had I known a lot of things in advance. Another big challenge, I would say, is thinking through funding sources. Running for office at the congressional level, you have to raise a substantial amount of funding. It was something like, it was like above $10,000 a day for me to fundraise every single day. And so I can see how also running for like a less high level office would lower that fundraising amount substantially and not feel as much pressure for that. But just kind of having an idea of when you're going into it, where that funding is going to come from. If you do have a large network to reach out to, It makes it a lot easier. And yeah, and so I would say those are the two main things. And they're obviously easy things to overcome as long as you're planning for that. And so I think that I don't want to discourage anyone, but those are two of the things that I found pretty challenging.
Yes, and that is Advance here. Advanced Native Leadership Political offers the training, so that in case people want to run for office, Advanced Native Political Leadership offers training. And I believe that they are taking applications next for February for next year. So
can I add a few more in too?
yes.
So I would also say I was involved in campaigns, but I would say I was also I would be what you would consider as like not necessarily a party insider. Like I worked on grassroots efforts to get out the vote, but I wasn't like coming up through the party. And I think that's different than a lot of other tracks that other people that run for office go through. They'll come up through the party, be on a county, like a party board, and then they'll be on like the state party board, and they'll kind of work their way up that way so that they're known within the party. And so I think it's harder for somebody coming from the outside and having people kind of maybe not necessarily outright, but maybe kind of wondering like, what time has she spent like, giving to the cause here? Why, well, yeah, like how many doors has she knocked on, that type of thing. And so that was another challenge. Again, not something that you can't overcome, but just something you may want to expect. And then finally, like having a family. So I'm a mom of 3. It does take a significant amount of time out of the house that you need to be campaigning, knocking on doors, all of that stuff. And so it was a challenge to balance the family demands and the time with my kids. A lot of times they would be coming with me to a lot of events, and they like to do that anyways, but maybe it's not always like the most fun thing for them at the time. And dealing with small kids, they all have their ideas of what they want to do anyways. And so that I just wanted to add those 2 things in.
And those are some excellent points and very, very true. Being in this political world for the past 12 years or so. And so with all the obstacles that you discussed, so what was it that made you say, yes to running for office? What made you say yes to run for office? Like, I'm going to do this.
So what made me say yes was my kids. Everything I've been doing to be involved in the community has really been thinking about making a better community for them, for when they grow up. And knowing that with a lack of Native representation at the congressional level in Arizona, if I don't put myself out there, then who is going to do it in this cycle? And so I just thought it was so critical that we at least try, and we also learn the answers to all of those lessons and obstacles that I just talked about. Now I have the answers to all of those. And so my daughter, fortunately, she's grown up kind of knowing elected leaders, knowing them as regular people. She has it planted in her head already that she wants to run for office, and she's 9 years old. And so I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, well, I know how to send you to college because I've been there, but I don't know how to send you to, run for some kind of office in the future. And so I do now, though, because I ran and I went there and I learned those lessons. And so at the very least, we are preparing our next generation for being those leaders, and that is worth it.
That is truly amazing. There's, so many obstacles stacked against us, one being a woman, being a Native woman. And, I always think about that too. What am I going to do when I have kids? So it's always nice that we have more Native women in these spaces to not only change the culture, but to make this job a little bit more accessible in that manner. Um, but going into the next question, so you were part of the Native Leadership Institute that Advance has this training program, this 4-day intensive virtual training program. And I got to be a fly on the wall last cohort, and it was a program that I don't think was there when I first ran for office. And we always say, man, we really wish we had this before we ran. I think it speaks volumes that this is a space for Indigenous folks, and it differs from other training programs. Where we talk about, like what are the obstacles of running. As an Indigenous person, I always speak about, I had a little identity crisis where I was like, I'm a Native woman and I want to run my campaign that way. But other folks might say, no, you need to, be less Native and be more like the mainstream. You're not running for tribal council. You're running as a Kansas state reps, and there's only so many Native folks. You're going to be representing a non-Native population. But that was just, kind of my little story. And I guess I would just say, how was Native Leadership Institute for you?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for including me in the Native Leadership Institute training. I wanted to take the training, even though I'd already run for office, because like I said, I was learning as I was going. And so I'm the type of person that likes to know all of the information and know what I was missing. And so I thought the training was really good because it gave me kind of this overarching holistic view of running for office. And I got to see where all of the little point pieces of information that I know about fit into like what somebody going in after the training would know about already. And so I like the emphasis on the elevator pitch. That is something that was recommended to me by elected leaders that I had asked for endorsements from. And they were like, okay, well, you need to sign up for this like 1-2-day boot camp so that you can, get your elevator pitch down really good. And so I thought that was very useful. And the overview of finances and field information was very helpful. And so I'm just so grateful that Advanced Native Leadership is putting the training out there for our next generation of leaders to have at their disposal before they have to learn it all on the ground.
You brought a lot of great points to the table too through that last cohort. As someone who has, ran for Congress, I think a lot of folks, when you ask them would they like to run for office, they're like Congress, and just how hard it is. Like you mentioned, I didn't know that a typical fundraising day is $10,000 a day. I would not even know where to start. Like that is just such an intimidating statistic already. So I think you brought a lot of, that consideration, and I enjoyed your input in the cohort. Would you recommend Native Leadership Institute to other folks?
Oh, of course. We need to build a bench of Native leaders that are considering running for office. In every state, everywhere across the country. We need to make sure that there are people that want to run for office at every single level, from the school board all the way up to federal office. And so I think it is so critical that we have that knowledge institutionalized in our communities and that people know what it takes. In addition, even if I think the training would be so valuable for people that want to work on elections or want to work in campaigns. I had a very difficult time finding staff or volunteers from like that that I could hire to work on my campaign that were from Native communities. So the more Natives that we get to take these trainings that know about how campaigns work, the more that we will be able to hire them like as we're running for office. So like it will create our own little economy here in the area of campaigns. And I think that will be so critical to getting that funding back into our communities, because campaigns take a lot of money and they spend a lot of money. So it's its own economy.
And to that point, we as candidates have the choice of who we hire most of the time, unless you're, maybe in a bigger candidate or on a tighter budget. But I know for me, I'm always trying to look for an Indigenous photographer to take new headshots, or an Indigenous graphic designer. Yeah.
Yeah, and the more like graphic design companies that take this training that know how to put together political messaging, I think is something that would be so valuable to candidates. The more the more people that, you know, want to learn finance, like candidates need finance managers. They need people that understand how to raise money for campaigns. And so if I want to hire a native that knows how to do that, like this training would be so valuable for them as well.
So that brings up the next question, and probably everybody wants to know is what's next in your career? Is there another run for Congress?
So the next step in my career is happy to say that I am currently working for the Biden administration. Unfortunately, under the Hatch Act, I can't take any steps to run for office while I am in my current role. I am just happy that this running for office did open the door to me joining the Biden administration. So I'm just very fortunate that I was able to build enough relationships, establish myself in the community enough that I have this opportunity before me. So I am currently serving as the Arizona State Executive Director under USDA for the Farm Service Agency.
That is awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I want to point out that, you know, even if you run for office and you don't win, you get put in a spotlight. And especially just being an Indigenous person in politics is so rare that we're trying to make it more of a norm. There's so many opportunities, you know, working in the administration, who's focused on getting more Indigenous folks at the table. You know, it really brings up and opens up more doors, which is a good thing. I know when I was on the fence of running for office, it was put to me that you get an opportunity to run a campaign and advocate on values and beliefs that, you know, you believe in, and you get to shout it out to the world. Even if you lose, you got to go in and tell folks what you were very passionate about.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
All right, so as we're coming to an end, we got a couple fun questions. So what is your current favorite song?
So my current favorite song is called Save Your Tears. It's by The Weeknd. And the reason why it's my favorite song is because my kids really like to play a game. I think it's called Just Dance. And so they're always like dancing to the song. In addition, my husband really likes this song. So it's become our family jam. And unfortunately, the kids aren't here, so they can't give you a demonstration of all of their moves.
I have a question, and just real quick, what advice would you give somebody that wanted to run for office? Like anything, maybe something you would have did differently. What advice would you give them?
Let me think. Wow, I could meet with them and have a whole meeting on, but I would say one thing would be to take this training if you're thinking about running for office, the Advanced Native Leadership Training. I think that is so valuable. But I think really just looking within yourself and asking yourself why you want to run for office. I just feel like there's so many politicians and people out there that are running for, you know, their career or for reasons other than the community. And so I think just going back to very basics of what do you want to change, and why are you running for something, and how are you going to make it better for the community? And so in order to do that, I think one of the good ways that you can determine, you know, whether or not this is for you is by doing some of the things that we talked about, which is like volunteering on campaigns to see what they're all about, see if this is really something that you want to put yourself into, and also learning the system. It will help you learn the system a lot more if you're volunteering, if you take the training. Like, you'll know so much more about it than you did before, and I think that will help you make a better decision for yourself and your family.
That is amazing. Amazing information. So it's out there, and and I also want to tell people, you see us having a conversation here. We've all ran for office. We've all done it. We can do it. You can do it too. And so it just, and when I ran for office, I didn't have a lot of people in this same boat. So I just kind of had to just grasp things here and there. But see, now the new generation, the new that want to run for office, have all this information available, like a training, like us, to ask questions or to reach out to and whatnot. So I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Christina for another fun question.
I have one more piece of advice too, was that don't worry about if you don't win, because we've all run for office on this call, but only 2 of us have won the election. But the thing is, you can make so much change, and you can do better for the world, for our communities, just by putting yourself out there and trying. So don't be afraid of what the results might be.
Yes, never be afraid of the unknown. Yes, please. And you know what? You paved the way for so many. Like you said, you didn't hear, before you ran for office, you didn't hear of anybody running for that seat that was Native. But now nobody can say that. And so now you've paved that way for them. The same way for Representative Haswood as well, in Lawrence area, representing Haskell area, Haskell Indian Nations University area. So you've already did that. You've already paved the way for somebody coming, so they can say, well, there's never been, it can't happen. Well, it did. And so I'll hand it back over to Christina for another fun question.
Well, I'm looking at the chat now, and there's a lot of good feedback of, running as a precinct committee person. I had no idea what that was 2 years ago.
That's part of learning the system. And so that's part of what the Democratic or the party here in Arizona really stressed, was learning that part of the system. So happy to say, as a result of those conversations, I am a precinct committee person. I just became a state committee person. And these are things that, our communities just are not that aware of. And so we need to get the word out to our friends and family members to get involved like that.
I think in Kansas too, I looked at my ballot in the primary, there was nobody's name on there. And in Kansas, I think you just need like 3 or 5 people to write in your name if you didn't register to be on the ballot. So it's pretty accessible. And then also, some states, I know Arizona might have a Indigenous caucus. It's me, Ponca, and Representative Stephanie Byers. That's our Indigenous caucus in the Kansas legislature. So if your state has an Indigenous Native American caucus, that's another good way to get involved. And then we had some good feedback of networking. Politics is about networking. I will admit that, I always ask at least 1 or 2 folks, hey, how's this person, their work ethic, if they're wanting to intern on my campaign or work on my campaign. And an emphasis on the younger generation. We need the younger generation to show up in politics. Someone put, the average age of a poll worker is 68. I don't even know much about, poll working and poll watching, and I'm learning as I go too. So our younger folks, we need you. We need your voice. We need your energy in all aspects of politics and civic engagement. But yeah, I think this was really great. Ginger, did you have any final words before we wrap up?
No, just thank you so much for being here. I second all of the additional ideas you had. I'm involved in our Native caucus here in Arizona. We have some really great Native leaders that have been working before I came on board to, do what I'm doing. But that helps with the networking as well, because all of the people in the Native caucus have their own networks as well. So the more you can get together and share about that, the better. In addition to volunteering on campaigns, that's a whole network of itself too. So all of that stuff helps, being involved in the boards and commissions like we talked about before. But I would say it's all a challenge, like anything in life. It's not easy, but it is worthwhile. If you're interested in running for office, definitely don't be discouraged, because there's a lot of things that can discourage you. And I think of something that Congresswoman David shared with me when I first started running for office. And she said to me, you know, Ginger, like, you're going to be surprised at who will be there for you during your run for office and who's going to come out of nowhere to be there for you. Some of the people that you thought, you know, would be right by your side the entire way, they're, you know, they might be busy with other aspects of their own life, their family, their career. They might not be available for you, but people will come and help you that you just never expected. And so it's kind of like, don't fear the unknown, just go with it and do the best that you can, and just believe that if you are there for a good reason and you have it within your heart to help the community, people will come out and support you.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in today. And we forgot to say happy birthday, Ginger.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for spending the evening a little bit with us. Thank you so much, Representative Ponka-We Victors-Cozad, for co-hosting with me. In the chat, we do have links to Advanced Native American Political Leadership Program with our Native Leadership Institute. We are accepting applications for our 2023 cohort, and you can nominate someone too. So nominate your best friend, nominate a leader, an Indigenous leader in your community, because we are needed, our voices are needed at all levels of government. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a great evening. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.